Chapter 222. Just when everyone was in a daze, a sneer suddenly came from the Fu family battle team. Ha, what are they doing? Someone even dared to impersonate Spade Z just to attract attention? Aren't you afraid of being kicked out? Impersonate. These two words were like a tornado that engulfed the entire esports arena. The audience did not want such a thing to happen, especially the haters, but if it wasn't an impersonation, then how could they explain the fact that the youngster couldn't log into the account? For a moment, everyone looked at Fujio differently. From the excitement just now to the suspicion now, there were even traces of disgust in the eyes of some people. Feng Shang panicked. You don't talk nonsense. The captain is Spade Z. Ha 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 ha. I'm dying of laughter. There's actually a stutterer here? The people from the Fu family battle team didn't even bother to hide their laughter. Reward you with a punch of consumer delight? I didn't expect you to be like this in real life. How poor was the He family that they had to find a little stutterer to compete? Feng Shang didn't mind hearing those words, but when Manager Feng heard those words, he wanted to drag the speaker over through the glass and teach him a lesson. But before he could move, a loud bang was heard. The silver-haired youngster, who had been sitting in front of the computer, kicked his chair away. With one hand in his pocket, he stared coldly at the members of the Fu family and smiled evilly. Who are you calling a stutterer? What right does a person who betrayed his master have to bark? The young man's voice was very pleasant. It was slow and magnetic, and it grabbed everyone's ears as soon as he opened his mouth. After hearing Fujio's words, the man's entire face turned red. He clenched his fists and wanted to say something more. Fu Shiming stretched out his hand to stop him. His face was full of arrogance. There's no need to talk nonsense with someone who wants to impersonate me. Trying to impersonate him? Soon, someone caught the main point of Fu Shiming's words, and an uproar broke out again. What does young Master Fu mean? Could he be the real Spade Z? Thinking about it, the possibility of young Master Fu being Spade Z is very high. Hadn't the media previously reported that he had been internally selected by the Qin Corporation Club? Such a guess seemed to have been confirmed. Everyone began to look at each other in dismay. The audience's perception immediately leaned towards Fu Shiming's side. If that's the case, then Fujio is really shameless. You're shameless to the extreme, okay? Who could impersonate our big Spade so easily? Shui Yaoyao looked at the condemning gazes directed at the youngster, which made her feel extremely uneasy. The saddest thing in the world was to be impersonated, and you still couldn't prove it was you. Little captain. It wasn't just Shui Yaoyao. Even the uncle Yin Wuyao looked worriedly at the young man's side profile. As a mother, He Honghua's heart ached as she looked at the back of the man standing in the middle, who was despised by everyone. It was her baby. She knew her child better than anyone else. In the past, Jill was weak, had low self-esteem, liked to throw tantrums, and liked to throw money around. But her Jill would never impersonate anyone. Chapter 223. At this time, Fu Shiming was already sitting in front of his computer. With a click of his finger, he logged in and entered the game page directly. The light turned red. The record holder of 99 first kills. The first place in the ranking competition. The game ID that had countless glory appeared in front of everyone just like that. Spade Z. The audience shouted this name in unison. Their chests shook with unspeakable excitement. Fu Shiming curled up the corner of his lips in the cheers of the audience. What his mother said was right. The game ID Spade Z was worth spending a lot of money to hire someone to get it. But he really didn't expect that trash to be Spade Z. When Fujio logged in with this game ID just now, he was a little uneasy until someone suggested impersonating him. Then he had a sudden inspiration, and came up with such a good idea. In the world of online games, whoever could log in with an ID was the real one. Fu Shiming stood up and glanced at Fujio coldly. When he bought the account, he didn't like this Spade Z. It turned out that there was a reason for his dislike. But now, he was going to use this game ID to completely ruin the He family army's reputation. What could Fujio do? She could only be anxious. The smile on Fu Shiming's face became wider. Old gamers like Feng Shang and Yin Wuyao knew at a glance that their captain's account had been tricked. Motherf *Ker. In Wuyao couldn't help but curse. He left the circle because of the unknown darkness. He didn't expect that when he came back he would encounter such a disgusting thing right at the beginning. What should he do now? Little Captain was the one who suffered the most, right? In Wuyao always said that Fujio was a high school student, like an uncle. But now he really felt sorry for her. How could he not feel sorry? Those who knew Fujio were all annoyed. Just when the second wave of sarcasm was about to come, they heard a bang. The door that originally led to the top floor was kicked open by someone. Qin Mo, who was wearing a pure black uniform, suddenly appeared at the door. His long legs were straight, and his side profile was so handsome that he seemed to have walked out of a manga. Standing behind him was Secretary Liang, who was panting heavily. He called out worriedly, "So Qin, this is still a live broadcast. Even if you can't stand others bullying young Master Jio, you can't be impulsive." The audience fell into silence the moment Qin Mo appeared, because no one expected Almighty Qin to come down. Although Qin Mo didn't say anything, the corner of his mouth curved coldly, and there was a strong chill in his eyes. With a flick of his finger, he threw the uniform into Secretary Liang's hand. It was obvious that he was going to do it himself. However, Fujiu looked back at him with a deep gaze. She just looked at him quietly. Qin Mo stopped in his tracks. The two equally handsome men stared at each other as if no one else was around. Apart from his handsomeness, there were also invisible sparks colliding. No one could understand the twists and turns within. But Qin Mo understood what the youngster meant. He wanted to do it himself. For this, Qin Mo raised his eyebrows. Fujio smiled as well. She touched her thin lips with her fingertips, and her left eye winked seductively. Chapter 224. Seeing that Almighty Qin went back, everyone was confused. What was going on? Logically speaking, Almighty Qin should have kicked whoever pretended to be Spade Z out. Why did he go back? Even Secretary Liang was a bit confused. Just now, CEO Qin's cold aura could almost freeze people's hearts. How come it seemed to have faded away so much? No, that's not right. Rather than saying it faded away, it was more like CEO Qin had suppressed the hostility in his eyes. Secretary Liang didn't think it was a good sign. Usually, the more silent CEO Qin was, the uglier he would die in the end. But what made Secretary Liang feel strange was that CEO Qin still had the patience to stand there and wait. The audience was puzzled as well. They turned to look at the esports arena again. In the midst of all the noise, that young man sat back in front of his computer calmly. His side profile was handsome and indifferent, as if he wasn't the one being despised. Fujio moved her slender fingers and twisted the black microphone on the side. She put it in front of her lips, and her silver hair fell down and covered her eyes. Then she laughed in a low voice. I didn't expect that my account would be hacked after a few days of not playing. But it doesn't matter. There is a good way to prove who is the real one. While she was talking, her hands were still typing on the keyboard. It was a real blind typing, and her fingers were so beautiful that people gasped. Damn, this person's hands are so fast. The commentator said this, and it wasn't hard to hear the amazement on his face. But it wasn't over yet. As Fujio's fingertips fell, the screen in front of her fell into darkness. Apart from a series of white codes, there was nothing else. What is this? Some people were shocked, and they couldn't believe what they saw. It's a network attack. He is doing a network attack on the spot. This is the first time I've seen a real network attack. It's so cool. Network attack. What do you mean? You don't even know this? He is hacking the official website of Hero. Wait a minute. It seems that not only the official website of Hero, but also the live streaming platform is under his control. Holy sh*t. That was way too awesome. Even if this person isn't Spade Z, I will still be his fan. This hacking skill is simply out of this world. Hacking skills? Are you saying that this person is a hacker? F***ck brother, look at the code. What's that jumping on the screen? Have some common sense. How can a hacker do this? No matter how excited the crowd was, Fujio's sitting posture was still very calm. She was still sucking on the lollipop, but it didn't affect her evil and cold voice at all. Everyone leaves their real information when they create an account. Although my information is hidden through special means, and no one can find out, even the officials can't see it. But all they need to do is touch the hidden data here, and everything will be revealed. The infiltration process was extremely fast. Before anyone could react, the young man had already pressed the enter key. The beautiful finger technique came to a screeching halt. The rhythmic clattering of the keyboard could no longer be heard on the court. Chapter 225. It was Fujio, not Fu Ximing. In an instant, everyone held their breath. Seeing this, those fans who claimed to love Spade Z and scolded Fujio shut up. Instead, some people who didn't say anything just now suddenly shouted, "My big Spade is so handsome." This was a direct acknowledgement of Fujio's identity. In fact, the audience who really liked Spade Z kept a low profile from the moment they entered the arena. They never believed that Fu Ximing was Big Spade. After all, they all remembered their idol's words. Big Spade had said that he would join the He group when he killed someone with one move in the last live broadcast. But the public opinion was distorted by some reports, which made people think that Fu Ximing might be Spade Z. They didn't understand why some fans didn't listen to their idol, and believed in some baseless analysis. Are you sure you're a fan and not a hater? The support was very powerful. Just one sentence was followed by a large number of whistles. Fu Ximing didn't expect things to turn out like this. Attacking the official website on the spot, and retrieving the registration information. He still felt that everything was a nightmare. Fujio, that sick loser, how could she be so powerful? Not to mention Fu Ximing's reaction. Even Feng Shang and Yin Wuyao didn't know that their captain could do this. Hacker. Such a mysterious profession wasn't even close to reality. Chen Xiaodong couldn't believe it. Their family's young master, who only cared about men, was actually a hacker. He Honghua's eyes were so shocked that she couldn't control herself. Her Jiao. That was her Jiao. In the midst of all the noise, Fujio stood up with one hand in her trouser pocket. Her posture was very cool. She looked at the Fu family team over there, and raised her eyebrows with a smile. Just 3 words, but Fu Ximing's face turned pale. Even his lips lost their usual arrogance. The word embarrassment wasn't enough to describe his expression. But the camera was pointed at him, and everyone in the audience saw the embarrassment on his face. They thought that this was the end of the matter. But those fans who claimed to love Spade Z felt that Fujio's actions were not only a slap to Fu Ximing's face, but also to their faces. They started to make a fuss. Since you are a hacker, surely you can tamper with the official registration information? She wanted to prove that she was Spade Z with just a form? Hehe, do you think we're that easy to fool? The real Spade fans almost had high blood pressure. Let me ask, do you really like Big Spade? Not here to defame him. We want the truth. When the self-proclaimed fan said this, he felt like a little angel of justice. Nothing else. Fu Ximing saw that the situation had taken a turn for the better, and his artificial voice rang out again. In this day and age, if you're a hacker, you can even turn black into white. Spade fans couldn't stand his attitude. They rolled up their sleeves and wanted to beat him up. At the same time, I'll pack up all those fake fans and throw them out through the window. Those comments stung my ears. Where was his intelligence? But at this moment, Fujio laughed. Her beautiful eyes seemed to be dyed with endless black mist. Fu Ximing, why are you in such a hurry? I didn't ask you to return the account. Chapter 226. Using a new account to compete? The referees looked at each other in shock. For so many years, no one had ever used a new account in the esports selection contest. There were too many limitations of a new account. After all, the top-level equipment in the game could only be used after reaching a certain level. Was this player planning to play in the ranking game without any equipment? But even so, there was no such rule in the rules. Because of the special situation, the referees had to look at the director's room, intending to talk to Manager Feng. Qin Mo's magnetic and deep voice sounded like a bottle of expensive red wine that had just been opened, exuding his unique grace. Let him use it. Being a man of few words was always in line with Almighty Qin's style. But the shoutcasters who knew their captain well felt their backs tighten. It seemed like their captain had never spoken up for anyone before. The two shoutcasters, who felt like they were spying on something, looked at each other, and without waiting for the referees to respond, they immediately said, "Okay, now let this player Fujio apply for a new account and get ready for the first match." It was a very straightforward opening match. A live broadcast needed to constantly generate topics, and it couldn't slow down the pace. Every team sat back in front of their computers. Which team would PK with which team in the ranking game was random. They thought it was just a competition, but because of the identity of Spadesy, there was another topic to talk about. The big screen locked onto the list of the first duel. In this match, Fu Ximing and Fujio didn't fight each other. Instead, the group of people who admired Fu Ximing wanted to PK with the He family army. "Young Master Fu, let's go first. We'll help you teach this reckless kid a lesson. That little stutterer and a has-been player are just a little bit better on the ranking list. What can they do? Using a new account and still daring to compete?" That person sneered. His eyes fell back on the computer screen, and he typed rapidly to his teammates. "The new account is their weakness. Destroy them all." "Yes. Understood." The game screen officially turned on. Fujio put on her headphones with her fingers. Her fingers weren't on the keyboard, but she used one hand to move the mouse. The other team thought that a new account with no attack power would be taken down quickly. Who knew that when they all approached the game ID 9? Awarding you a slap of pleasure, and North of Een Mountain appeared out of nowhere, and used their ultimate skills at the same time. Silver light exploded, and the team was instantly wiped out. It hadn't even been a minute since the battle started. There were still two people on the He family army's side who hadn't made a move, but the health of the person on the other side was already empty. Was there still a need to fight? The opponent's captain struggled to stand up. Shan Bei turned around and used up the last drop of his pen. Not only was the game being synchronized on the screen, but it was also synchronized with the person playing the game. That beautiful hand speed and counterattack was simply amazing. A has-been god? Little stutterer. I'll kill you. Yin Wuyao and Feng Shang had never had such tacit understanding before. They typed the same sentence at the same time. A gale of praises rang out in the arena. Chapter 227. Feng Shang was about to vomit blood when he heard that. He was never angry, but his face turned cold. "I can't accept your love." This was the first time he broke through his psychological barrier and shouted so loudly in public. Fujio tilted her head and glanced at him. Feng Shang thought that his idol was going to praise him, and he blushed. Unexpectedly, his idol patted him on the shoulder and smiled handsomely. "So anger can cure stuttering." Feng Shang. "Okay, get ready for the second round." Under Fujio's command, the He family army entered the game page. Fujio only moved around for the whole 3 rounds of ranking PK. But was it really as simple as it looked? Anyone who had played the game before would know that the most difficult part of the game was the details. How to move around without being swept by others, and how to move around without affecting the teammates' performance. Only a master could do that. The commentators were all professional players of the Qin Corporation. From what they saw, they could tell that Fujio was not a player who only knew how to leech experience. On the contrary, that young man didn't make a move, but once he made a move, even they couldn't be sure how good he was. But some fans were so arrogant that they firmly believed that Fujio was only here to leech experience. After 1 round, there were only 4 teams left. Finally, a line of words appeared on the screen. He family army PK Fu Corporation team. The members of the Fu family were indeed very good. After all, they had received professional training. No matter how amazing Fujio's hacking skills were, they couldn't believe that the opponent was good at playing games. After all, they had been in the He Corporation for a long time. How could they not know what Fujio was like? And even if the opponent really knew how to play games, how could he beat them with a new account? They were not like the previous teams, who had been hiding their skills for so long. It was not a problem to control the North of Een Mountain. "Captain." Someone typed to Fu Ximing. From the beginning, all the attacks were initiated by the North of Een Mountain. Should we focus on him? Fu Ximing controlled the account of Spadesy and sent back and forth. I'll block, you guys cooperate. Pay attention to defense. Awarding you a slap of pleasure. Understood. Such a setup clearly showed that they didn't care about Fujio's new account. They didn't even care about Shui Yaoyao. Fu Ximing had bought a lot of top-notch equipment for today's rookie selection contest. He raised his long saber and rushed in the direction of north of Een Mountain. Their plan was to kill north of Een Mountain, then turn around and give awarding you a slap pleasure a stunning skill. Because once they made their move, the first person to save north of Een Mountain was definitely awarding you a slap of pleasure. Someone else. In the He family army, other than these two who were worth dealing with, the other two only knew how to move slowly. There was simply no need to guard against them. Yin Wuyao had also seen through his opponent's plan, and he immediately went into full defensive mode. You think you can stop me? Fu Ximing coldly laughed. Admit it, north of the Yin Mountain. You are already past your prime. You are just an old pro player who has lost all value. Even if you participate in the competition again, what can you do? Yin Wuyao had to admit, when he heard this, he did pause for a moment. Chapter 228. There was a clicking sound. A rhythmic tapping sound rose up. A clear and cold voice sounded in everyone's ears. Yao Yao, replenish Uncle Yin's blood. Yes. Shui Yaoyao's cooperation was also very good. This girl who was ignored by everyone tilted her mouse and released the potion in time. Fujio's voice was still there. Fengshang, assist me. Yes. This meant that Fujio was not only controlling her own character, but she was also controlling the overall situation of the battle. Fu Ximing's people saw this and wanted to go back to deal with Shui Yaoyao. After all, if she healed north of Een Mountain, the HP they just lost would come back. Who knew that before he could move his feet, a figure appeared in front of him. With the Jiu symbol on it, the white robe spread out, and it was as if the wind itself had arrived. The speed at which he rushed up was too fast. Really too fast. That person didn't even see clearly who the person in front of him was. Fujio's slender hands danced on the black keyboard. With beautiful positioning and operation, a killing critical hit. The dazzling silver light filled the entire screen in an instant, creating a magnificent scene. That person who wanted to go back to defend saw his HP drop to the freezing point. He didn't even have the chance to heal himself before he fell down heavily. People who died in ranked matches couldn't be revived. That person looked at the black screen in front of him, threw the mouse in his hand, and arched his long legs forward unwillingly. How did he get hit just like that? However, to everyone's surprise, the young man's attack wasn't over yet. On the screen, when the silver light was about to end, Fujio waved the mouse in her hand and turned back to bite the incoming character. She did another absolute sweep. Holy sh*t. Yinhu, did you see that? His hands didn't even stop. The shoutcaster was so excited that he grabbed the arm of his friend next to him. The other shoutcaster, Yinhu, surprisingly didn't refute him. He looked at the screen in front of him seriously. Suddenly his eyes flashed. There's more. There's more. This is unheard of. Fujio had pure black headphones on her silver hair. Her eyes didn't even look at the keyboard. She only stared at the screen, with a lollipop in her mouth. Her left hand was on the keyboard, and her right hand was on the mouse. Generally speaking, the speed of an ordinary person's left hand would not be very fast. But to her, it made no difference whether she used her left hand or right hand. This was also the reason for this unprecedented chain of critical hits. Fu Ximing had no idea what was going on. He only saw a flash of silver light, and his HP dropped by more than half. He didn't expect to be greeted by another wave of silver light before he could even move. He manipulated Spadesy's account, but he didn't even lift his hand. There was a loud bang. Critical strike. Dominating the entire field. The silver light fell. Less than a minute after the start, two large words appeared on the screen. KO. Fujio was still smiling, devilish, handsome, and unruly. However, it was already over. From the moment Fujio put her hand on the keyboard, the ending was decided. The shock never stopped. The entire audience stared blankly at this scene. Not only in the live stream, But even the players in front of their screens were stunned. Their eyes and hearts were numb. Chapter 229. Such a scene seemed to be very familiar. The youngster didn't bring any equipment, and even used a new account, but he could destroy the entire team with one move. Looking at the past 10 years of competitions, only Almighty Chin could do that. This not only tested the player's skills, but also required the player to have a clear strategic layout in his mind. Almighty Chin was known as the most valuable professional player precisely because he had this kind of ability to control the entire field. Now there was this kind of amazing scene, and it was done by a newbie. This was enough to shock everyone. In fact, even Yin Wuyao didn't expect their team leader to be this good. He looked at the silver light and the two characters that represented a complete victory on the screen. At that moment, the youngster's words came to Yin Wuyao's mind again. How is it enough to win an award? If you don't shock the esports world, why bother playing games? This time, not only the esports world of Jiang City was shocked, but even in the whole country, this kind of skill was top-notch. Especially that last roundhouse that showed how elegant it was to hit the enemy. It was really cool. Those anti-fans who were not convinced were all dumbfounded. That kind of technique was obviously Spadesy's most commonly used counterattack in dungeons. A person's identity could be faked, but the characteristics of this person's character couldn't be erased. And there were people who studied Spadesy's fighting style. If one didn't have a certain level of hand speed, they couldn't imitate it at all. They didn't know how to describe their inner feelings. They only felt the pain on their faces, and that kind of awkwardness was indescribable. Fu Ximing was in a daze the whole time. He was still looking at the screen where the silver light hadn't faded. He couldn't believe that they had been wiped out. Usually, every classic move of the winning side would be replayed on the big screen. This was something that happened in every single competition. However, only this time, when the ultimate move was replayed, even the commentator didn't come back to his senses. He just sat there with his eyes wide open. Whoosh! The whole stadium was filled with whistles. Many people stood up directly, waving their arms and hitting their support sticks loudly. Fu Ximing's face was unprecedentedly pale, without a trace of blood. He was still logged into his Spadesy account on the screen. That gray screen with this ID was very glaring. Everyone knew that a large part of the reason why Spadesy was liked by so many people was because he had never lost in the game. 99 consecutive wins, and as long as he played, he would get the first kill. And it was because of this record that he was so popular. But now this godly ID with countless glory was in Fu Ximing's hands, and he didn't even have the power to fight back. In the end, it was already clear who was the real one. But it wasn't over yet. Chapter 230. After hearing this sentence, the uproar at the scene almost exploded. The number of clicks on all major online platforms broke 100 million. Everyone was leaving comments in the comment section. Even the platform technicians had never seen such a fast rate of comments. They were even worried that the network would go down. Cool. This is my big spade. I can KO you with a new account. I won't talk if I can do it. Where's the commentator? Play the replay and explain. The commentator has also become my big spades fangirl. I just want to ask you, who else is there? Who else is there? Open your eyes wide. Those who are slandering my big spade. I've been waiting in front of the computer for a long time. As a middle-aged uncle, let me give you a scientific explanation. Only my big spade's hand speed can turn around and bite you. Do you understand? Fu Ximing, return my big spade's account. If you don't return it, I'll show you the strength of us hackers. These comments would appear on the live screen at the same time for better interaction online and offline. When the audience saw this, they were all very excited. Middle-aged uncle also likes my big spade? My big spade likes both men and women. He said they are hackers. I don't care. Anyway, return our big spade's account. Return it. In an instant, all the Spade fans in the audience were asking Fu Ximing to return the account. The Fu family's team couldn't even sit still when they were in such an embarrassing situation. Fu Ximing himself clenched his fists, and his face turned white and then purple. How could the media let go of such a scene? Of course, they would capture it immediately. Fu Ximing hurriedly used his hands to block, but the more he did so, the more embarrassing the scene became. Can't you have some manners? Why did you let him return the account to you? Some anti-fans couldn't accept this result. Because once they admitted that Fu Jiu was Spadesy, their words would become knives stabbing themselves. They still wanted to quibble, but as soon as they opened their mouths, they were suppressed. Shut up. Return the account. Don't think that a true Spade fan is easy to bully. When it's time to be tough, you won't be careless. One more word and I'll throw you out. But at this moment, Fu Jiu looked towards the audience and laughed. Her seductive skills and voice made people feel like they were in their bones. I don't need him to return it, I'll take it back myself. As she spoke, her finger moved, and an invisible dialogue box appeared on the computer screen. She pressed the enter key. The machine in front of Fu Ximing seemed to be controlled by something invisible, and it began to jump with code that no one could understand. F***CK. While playing games, he could even plant a virus in the opponent. Let me ask you, how did you do it? I was only focused on Big Spade's ultimate move. Gosh. I request the officials to give me a super slow replay. It's useless to watch the replay. It's a technical problem to plant a virus in a game. My Big Spade's handsomeness surpasses the heavens. The commentators finally thawed. That was because Fu Jiu's right hand moved the mouse, and her right hand quickly switched to another account. She logged back into the ID that made countless people who really liked esports, but couldn't get ahead through the system. Spadesy. Just like what the young man said. I don't need him to return it, I'll take it back myself. Not only was Spadesy on the screen, but there was also data showing that someone had changed the password of the ID Spadesy 2 days ago. Chapter 231. Fu Ximing's face was almost swollen. The shoutcaster, Yin Hu, had also come from the military courtyard. When he saw this, he couldn't suppress his instincts. He sneered into the microphone. I don't think I need to explain this part. The person who spent money to steal someone's account can leave now that he has been exposed. When the Fu family's team members heard this, not only their expressions but even their movements were stiff. Out of so many esports competitions, they were the only team that was kicked out by the organizer. Not only that, such a large-scale esports live broadcast must have been watched by all the other teams, which meant that they had lost face all over the country. In the future, not only in Jiang City, but also in other cities, this would be their lifelong shame. The audience in the stadium would not give them face at all. If they only lost, they would get the respect of the loser. But Fu Ximing ignored the rules and thought that he was powerful. Not only did he steal someone else's account, but he also incited the media to impersonate them. The reason why gamers loved esports so much was that they could get fairness in Hero that they couldn't get in real life. In the past, background didn't matter here. As long as you were skilled enough, you could stand out. But in recent years in the esports circle, there were some people who relied on their good looks to find others to play for them. Or they could become famous just because they were rich. This made some people feel discouraged. Fu Ximing's blatant actions had completely touched the bottom line. Many real Spadesy fans were worried about Fu Jiu in front of their computers, afraid that the young man couldn't prove himself. But in the end, the young man not only proved himself, it also proved one thing. As long as you had the ability, you wouldn't be afraid of rumors. Nobody knew when it started, but when people saw the idea of Spadesy, they would believe that there was still a place in this world where their passion was not extinguished. They didn't know when it started, but when they saw the idea of Spadesy, they would believe that there was still a place in this world where their passion was not extinguished. No one needed to say which team the champion would belong to. The three big words "He Family Army" dominated the 10 screens in the stadium, with Fu Jiu's beautiful and fair face and the slow-motion playback of her ultimate moves. No matter how many times they watched it, it was still too handsome. In the audience, He Honghua's round face was already covered in tears. She covered her mouth with her hands, afraid that she would cry. She had never told anyone about how she had led her life. Sometimes she was so tired that she wanted to divorce Fu Zhongyi. In this world, there are too many people who will respect you because you have enough money, power, and culture. He doesn't care what you did. On the same occasion, she appeared with the three. She was just a village girl. She deserved to be robbed by that man. That third was a fairy who was praised by others, who asked her to not be as good-looking as him, and to have such a figure. He Honghua didn't like money, but she couldn't live without it. What about her Jiao? Once she filed for divorce, the company would lose her. What would happen to her Jiao in the future? She couldn't swallow her anger. He had to earn it back. However, all of her team members had been poached away at the last minute. She had been deserted by her friends and family, and she had been slandered by the public. Everyone wanted to step on her and make her completely bankrupt. He had really been discouraged before. In such a dark night, she had to travel from city to beg for help. She really wanted to cry. Even when the He family army appeared, she still thought that she would just treat it as her Jiao's happiness. But he had won. Chapter 232. He Honghua didn't know how to describe her feelings. She just looked at the tall and slender figure on the field with red eyes. In a mother's mind, the greatest happiness for her child was to be recognized. The background music of Hero sounded. All the members of the He family army stood up. Every one of them had very bright eyes. We have to admit that sometimes there was a kind of handsomeness that had nothing to do with appearance. It was a kind of aura that emanated from the inside out. For people of different heights, wearing the same uniform, stood side by side. The youngster was in the lead, and behind them were rows of glowing computer screens. All the cameras were aimed at one direction. The captain of the He family army, Fu Jiao. Just as some people expected, this youngster was going to be popular. The esports selection contest organized by the Qin Group was broadcasted nationwide. It wasn't over yet. Over there were reporters asking questions at the All-Star press conference. The question was from the ever-victorious team that suppressed the Supreme Alliance last year, the Xiangnan team. Almighty Xiao, I don't know if you paid attention to the selection contest organized by the Qin Group. The person called Almighty Xiao sat calmly. How can I pay attention when I'm here? Reporter. There's no way to continue this topic. I heard that there's a player called Spadesy over there. He destroyed the whole field as soon as he appeared. The man raised his eyebrows. There's such a thing? It's being broadcasted on all the online platforms. The reporter was already excited when he said this. He wanted to grab some news. After all, everyone knew that Xiangnan and the Supreme Alliance would have a tough battle in the national competition soon. If he could grab some news at this time and use it as a gimmick, it would definitely be a hit. The man just glanced at the reporter, and then, oh, just a no? Tell me what you're feeling right now. The agent standing behind the man couldn't stand it anymore. He smiled like a Maitreya Buddha. Xiao Jing, you can tell me more about your feelings. Feelings? Xiao Jing thought about it seriously and said, please broadcast this kind of esports competition on TV. I don't like the internet. Reporter. You, an esports god, don't like the internet. I heard that Almighty Qin appreciates this Spade Z very much. The reporter saw that Xiao Jing was about to leave, so he had to use his big move. As expected, the man walked back, his face serious. Tell me in detail, how did Qin Mo appreciate this newcomer? Reporter. Xiaoda, this is a press conference, not a small talk. You're paying so much attention to Almighty Qin. Aren't you secretly in love with him? The people from the other teams saw it too. There were many players from the top 4 in the country. This Spadesy is not bad. Why don't you say that it's because his opponents are too weak? There will always be some loopholes in his attacks. It's just that his opponents didn't notice them. Anyway, we'll meet him in the national competition. Let's show him what real esports is like then. Of course. Regardless of what was going on in the outside world, the golden trophy that symbolized first place was already in Fu Jiao's hands. Regardless of whether they were professional or non-professional, all of the hero fans were watching this scene through the live stream. Chapter 233. In the beginning, Some people were wondering why the young man wanted to go there. But when they came back to their senses, they remembered that Almighty Chin was there. What was going on? In the distance, Chin Mo was wearing a pure black uniform. He was standing on 10 steps, and when he saw the young man walking towards him, his long and narrow eyes became more and more enchanting. His expression was still indifferent. Even now, he only raised his eyebrows slightly, full of an aura of abstinence. Everyone stared blankly at this scene. Not only the audience, but even the judges were stunned, because they never thought that the story would develop like this. What did the young man want to do by walking in front of Almighty Chin like this? In that instant, all the cameras shifted their positions and focused on the two of them. Secretary Liang, who was nervous, was also caught in the frame. He just wanted to pull young Master Jiu over and ask him what he wanted to do by doing this at this time. Didn't he know that there were cameras around? What if someone found out that our boss Chin might be gay? Chen Xiaodong basically had the same idea as Secretary Liang. He still hadn't forgotten why his young master played online games. It was all because of young Master Chin. Now, he was even more certain of this idea. However, neither Fujio nor Chin Mo cared about other people's opinions. The two of them were originally luminous, and when they walked together, the brilliance would be multiplied by 10 times. The young man had a slight smile on his face. He was handsome and attractive, and even through the screen one could feel his youthful aura. His side profile was so clean that even the tiny hairs could be seen on the camera. What was different from the young man was the noble and domineering aura that Almighty Chin exuded. Two people, one on the stage, the other below, standing on the steps in the middle. Suddenly, it was as if all the lights ran into the young man's eyes, like a broken diamond, shining beautifully, because he was too handsome. When such a scene appeared on the screen in the form of a picture, people only felt that they were looking at a beautiful comic script. Fujio was still walking forward with a smile. The judges were wondering if Boss Chin would give the young man a look and let him experience it himself. He didn't expect this. Just as Fujio reached the last step, Chin Mo suddenly reached out his hand and pulled the youngster up. Fujio didn't hesitate. She took the force and leaned forward to smile. Her thin lips moved close to Chin Mo's left ear, and her voice was very melodious. Brother Mo, you don't have to come down from the altar. I can just come up. How can I be worthy of you if I don't have the ability to wipe out the entire team? What he said made people think too much. Chen Xiaodong covered his eyes when he saw the scene. Young master, what exactly do you want? You're flirting with Almighty Chin in front of the entire nation. Shui Yaoyao's heart trembled. She looked to her left, then to her right. The audience's jaws dropped. Your Highness Jiao, did you really not see the frown on Almighty Chin's face when you got close to his ear? The two commentators were also speechless. They had never seen their captain being flirted with like this before. Chapter 234. But this was exactly the kind of look that wanted to strangle the other person, but had a hint of indulgence and gentleness in his eyes. However, it was recorded by the camera. Apart from the audience present, there were also those Chin Mo fans watching the live broadcast. They were completely blown away. When had Almighty Chin ever smiled like this? So charming. The network that hadn't been paralyzed at any time just now had reached its limit. As Chin Mo curled his thin lips, he raised his hand, grabbed the young man's collar, and pulled him in front of him. The screen blurred. In an instant, the comment section exploded. What's going on? It seems like the platform crashed. F*CK, where's the technology? Where's the platform technology? I want to see the follow-up. What was my Almighty Chin doing just now? What was he doing? What was he doing? Only the people who saw it at the scene knew. He grabbed the young man with one hand, and his smile was cold and seductive. I'll teach you a lesson later. Fujio was innocent. Why did she have to be taught a lesson? This kind of conversation was really, so loving. There were many fujoshis at the scene, especially the girls who liked to play games, and they liked to match their Almighty with them. But they had never thought of matching Almighty Chin with anyone. After all, a person like Almighty Chin was like a flower on a high mountain. to be watched from afar and not to be messed with. The most important thing was that Almighty Qin was straight. The kind of straight as a pencil. No one dared to match him with anyone, for fear of being thrown into the cold palace by him. Even the esports reports only dared to say which team's female player Almighty Qin had met, and they didn't dare to directly say that they were friends, etc. Not to mention that there was a guy next to Almighty Qin. But now, seeing the young man standing in front of him, and Almighty Qin not forgetting to tidy his hair while teaching him a lesson, all the Fujoshi's hearts popped out from seeing this scene. They were so compatible. They were a perfect match. Just when the excited audience took out their mobile phones to take pictures of the two of them, Chen Xiaobei's expression changed. The platform was still flooding with comments. Rolling around acting cute, hurry up and give us a follow-up. How to give them a follow-up. The technical staff was about to cry. The media, on the other hand, was overjoyed. They kept snapping photos from all angles and poses. Every single photo could be used as a page, and could even be privately circulated. Am I the only one who noticed that my big spade calls Almighty Qin brother Mo? Ah. In other words, the two of them have already met before? That's possible. That's why Almighty Qin came down just now, because he couldn't stand my big spade being bullied. No, you can't think like that. Almighty Qin is straight. Almighty Qin is still straight. The fangirls were going crazy. They also found it strange that watching the interaction between the two equally handsome people was even more heartwarming than when they themselves were in a relationship. What was going on? He Honghua was also wondering what was going on. She asked in a daze, Xiaodong, when did you meet Xiao Qin? Chen Xiaodong's tiger back trembled. Madam, don't worry. Young master is absolutely straight. He doesn't have any thoughts about young master Qin. He doesn't play games to chase after young master Qin. Young master's action just now wasn't a declaration of love. It was just a normal interaction. Yes, a very normal interaction. He Honghua didn't understand, and her face was full of confusion. The fangirls standing at the side suddenly realized. So my big spade is chasing after young master Qin. Chapter 235. But even without Chen Xiaodong's words, the atmosphere between Qin Mo and Fujio was a little too intimate. It was rare to see Qin Mo treat someone like this. No one knew what the young man said to him with a smile. Almighty Qin reached out and pulled the zipper of the young man's uniform up to his head, taking care of the young man as if he was taking care of his younger brother. Fujio looked down at Almighty Qin's hand, with a lollipop in her mouth. Her clean side profile was so handsome that it made people want to scream. Two equally outstanding people standing together was really pleasing to the eye, not to mention their actions were so ambiguous. Many fangirls already knew that from today onwards, they would have another pair of CP fans, and they couldn't be happier. But those who played esports knew that it was the mutual admiration between two masters. No one could predict the future of the young man. Although the Supreme Alliance was the king of Jiang City, they hadn't won the national championship for 3 years in a row. Although Almighty Qin was known as the most valuable esports player, he was a single player. The final victory of the national competition was determined by team combat. Moreover, the level of the professional teams in the country wasn't like today's, where they could be destroyed by one person. But no one could deny that the Supreme Alliance, which had Almighty Qin and had absorbed Spadesy, was very strong. No one knew. Everything in the future was unknown. When Fujio led the He family army and stood in the Supreme Alliance, Feng Shang was the most excited other than Shui Yaoyao. He looked at Feng Yi, who was walking towards him, and his eyes were red. He took the honor from his brother's hands, and his back was straight. Feng Yi had so many things to say to his brother, but in the end this manager, who could make all esports players famous, just walked past him and went to the next player. Because Feng Yi was very clear that this honor should be given to Feng Shang cleanly. Even if it was mentioned in the esports circle one day, no one would say, look, he became famous because of his brother. In fact, he is just a stutterer. The person who chased after his pants when he was young had grown up. At this moment, Feng Yi finally believed that even without his protection, his brother could still stand out from the crowd. Fujio was of course the last speaker. Under the bright lights, the youngster held the glittering gold trophy in his hand and glanced at the other three standing beside him. Facing the camera, he suddenly smiled. I want to give this trophy to my mother. Because of me. She has broken her heart too many times. Because of her poor background, she was ridiculed by others. She moved from city to negotiate with sponsors. Finally, she managed to preserve the company's qualifications and form a team. That's why we can come here. So I want to give this trophy to her mother. No problem. The three of them shouted loudly and looked in He Honghua's direction. He Honghua covered her mouth and cried tears of joy. Fu Jiu's eyes darkened, and her silver hair fell down. Finally, we used to be looked down upon. And even when we worked hard, we were questioned. He wanted to use this as a general to tell some people. My team members have never been out of breath. In an instant, thunderous applause rang out. Yin Wu Yao, Shui Yao Yao, and Feng Shang looked at each other, walked together, and lifted Fu Jiu up. If there really was a king in this world, in that case, we will be your loyal subjects. Chapter 236. Supreme Alliance's new team was formed. There were a total of 11 people. Qin Mo stood in the middle. The team members lined up in a row. Every one of them was in their uniform, looking indescribably handsome. That surging aura was just like the slam dunk that had swept the world of anime and manga back then. It swept over and ignited people's hearts. Such a scene was broadcasted on all major online platforms at the same time. Many fangirls couldn't help but want to play hero again after watching it. At this time, in the lounge of the business reception, Fu Zhongyi's arm was held by a well-maintained woman. She was wearing a woolen coat that cost tens of thousands of dollars. Her makeup was exquisite, and her other hand was holding a wine glass filled with red wine. She was smugly clinking glasses with the investor. Director Li, you really have a good eye for choosing our Fu's battle team. There wasn't a man who didn't like to be praised by a beauty, especially Mr. Li. He laughed and waved his hand. Speaking of foresight, Mr. Su's foresight is still the best. You've poached so many worthy members. After this selection contest, once the name of the Fu's battle team spreads, our good days will come. President Fu, I'm so envious that you have such a good wife. Fu Zhongyi glanced at Su Mei, who was standing beside him. His expression was one of superiority. CEO Li was never stingy with his praises for his business partners. And young master, you're really good at gaming. Honestly, there was a period of time where I really believed He Honghua, thinking that Spade was there. That was really hilarious. I know, right? Su Mei pretended to sigh regretfully. It's really hard to say about big sister Honghua. Sometimes, I don't want to make things difficult for everyone. Zhongyi understands me, but she just can't get along with me. Fu Zhongyi sneered. That's true. Why do you care about her? Actually, I don't care about my status. Su Mei looked at Fu Zhongyi, and her voice gradually became softer. Her eyes turned red. But Ximing is so outstanding, and he has always been criticized by others since he was young. Just because he is 7 months behind Ximing, I really can't bear to. Hearing that, Fu Zhongyi's heart softened. He reached out and pulled his wife into his arms, gently patting her. After this selection contest, let's see if He Honghua still has the capital to delay the divorce. You don't have to worry about the others. My Fu family only recognizes our Ximing family. As for the others, it's fine even if we don't want that kind of trash. Mr. Li was not interested in listening to this kind of family infighting. He was a businessman, and what he cared most about was the interests of businessmen. Today is a good day. Don't mention unhappy things. The Qin Group's competition should be over by now. President Li said and smiled again. President Fu, shall we go down now? I believe that many of our friends from the media are waiting to interview us, especially some advertisers. After watching this year's selection contest, they will definitely keep coming. Mr. Li is right. Su Mei knew what kind of person she was. She definitely knew that in this circle, she had to take advantage of the situation. She said coquettishly, "Hubby, hurry up and smile. Think about how Ximing made us proud, so that we can accept the interview later." Chapter 237. In the center of the cocktail party, a red carpet was spread all over the floor, showing off the nobility. There were indeed many people there, all of whom were business celebrities in Jiang City. In the magnificently decorated hall, everyone was holding a glass of wine, talking about something with amazement on their faces, and the word selection contest could be vaguely heard. Su Mei walked down the spiral staircase holding Fu Zhongyi's arm. When she saw the scene, her thin lips curved into a smile. Her prediction was right. As long as he had the identity of Spadesy, her son would be famous. With this certainty, Su Mei walked down the stairs quite confidently. The waiters in suits were still busily shuttling among the crowd. When people saw Fu Zhongyi and Su Mei coming down, the voices of conversation stopped abruptly. After all, they were all people in the business world, and they had been here for a long time. Naturally, they wouldn't show their expressions, so they naturally changed the topic. However, their eyes would involuntarily look at Fu Zhongyi's side. Being stared at like that, Su Mei's attitude became even higher. She turned sideways to let the waiters pour her wine, and then she blended into the crowd. Boss Li was also smiling happily, thinking that in less than a minute, someone would definitely come over to talk to them. The three of them looked at each other with confidence. Su Mei even pretended to raise her glass and take a sip of red wine, with a big smile on her face. Who knew? 1 minute passed. 2 minutes passed. 3 minutes passed, still no one came over. There were reporters taking pictures of them. But the feeling of taking pictures like that was very strange, not like a formal shooting. It was a little hard to describe. Usually, if someone came to interview them at this time, they wouldn't refuse. Why did they hide? Boss Li frowned, feeling a little awkward, but he couldn't tell what it was. Things didn't develop for a long time, so Su Mei couldn't help but feel a little anxious. After all, the purpose of attending this cocktail party was to make friends with more advertisers tonight. It couldn't go on like this. Others didn't move, but Su Mei moved. She held her glass and came to the side of an investor who had been eyeing the esports project recently. Boss Lu, long time no see. That Boss Lu glanced at her and didn't say anything. Su Mei continued to smile. I wonder if you have watched this year's selection contest? I didn't look. Boss Lu's words were also very artistic. But after seeing the pictures in the moments, I plan to go home and watch the replay. I heard that there is a player called Spadesy who is not bad. When Fu Zhongyi and Su Mei heard him mention Spadesy, their smiles grew wider. Fu Zhongyi enunciated each word carefully. My son is untalented, but it is his good fortune to be able to catch Boss Lu's eye. Boss Lu took a sip of wine and didn't say anything, tacitly acknowledging his modesty. On the other hand, the people at the side quieted down when they heard the conversation. But at this moment, the reporters all raised their cameras, looking like they wanted to steal the limelight. Chapter 238. After saying this, Su Mei made a moved expression, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What a good acting. Unexpectedly, Boss Lu raised his eyebrows. Who told you that Spadesy is your son, Fu Ximing? Ah. Su Mei was stunned by this rhetorical question. She stood there, not knowing what to do. Not only that, but her expression was also synchronized with the camera. Fu Zhongyi and Mr. Li were confused. If Spadesy wasn't Ximing, who else could it be? President Fu, although it's not convenient for me to say anything as an outsider, a man should be responsible. In today's society, which man doesn't have children outside? It's just that it's rare for the second son to ride on the eldest son's head. Mr. Lu's voice was very calm, and he was still holding a glass of wine in his hand. What everyone found strange was that, logically speaking, CEO Lu was a well-behaved CEO. He would definitely not say such things in such an occasion. Could it be that he was drunk? After all, Boss Li was the middleman. He opened his mouth, wanting to speak up for Fu Zhongyi. Boss Lu, you don't understand. Boss Fu's eldest son is really unpresentable. He doesn't have anything he wants, and yet he acts all high and mighty. Rumor has it that he likes men. Isn't he a pervert? No matter how magnanimous President Fu was, he could not tolerate his son being like this. Can't take it out? Boss Lu didn't answer his question, and just asked with a smile. At this time, the quick-witted Sume finally realized that something was wrong, and was about to say something. But it was too late. At this point, Manager Lee blurted out, "Yes. The useless Fujio you're talking about is Spadesy." Boss Lu put away the wine glass. "Boss Fu, your two sons are indeed very different. The former is very skilled, while the latter only knows how to hack accounts. Fortunately, they are competing in the esports arena, not using tricks like a mistress. Boss Su, you two are really addicted to pretending to be others. Your son pretended to be others in the competition, and you still pretended to be others at the banquet. Boss Fu likes you, it really is a perfect match." All of a sudden, not only Sume, but even Fu Zhongyi's face froze. His cheeks turned white and then red. Only they knew how they felt. The surrounding people also laughed after hearing Mr. Lu's words. As for what everyone was laughing at, everyone knew very well in their hearts. Sume had never been so humiliated in all her years of life. She had graduated from a famous university, and was also a radio host. She knew exactly how to control public opinion. So, even when she had snatched the man from He Honghua, no one had said a word about it. But today she had slapped her own face. As for Fu Zhongyi, his mind was blank. Actually, he had no idea that Fu Ximing was impersonating Spadesy, which explained his reaction. What's more, what did Director Lu just say? That eldest son of his was Spadesy. As an investor who had taken drastic measures against He Honghua at the last minute, he was even more confused. Spadesy is He Honghua's son. How is this possible? Manager Lee said anxiously. Manager Lu, is the information you got wrong? Chapter 239. Hearing that, Boss Lee immediately took out his cell phone. Fu Zhongyi also went over there. The entire online platform was promoting the topic of Fujio. The young man had one hand in his pocket, standing in the Supreme Alliance. Not only was he not overwhelmed by the aura, but the image of him with a lollipop in his mouth gave a strong impact. The most valuable king of popularity. The first kill weapon with an incredible face. Spadesy. These were all titles given to Fujio by the Qin group. Every title was like a slap on Fu Zhongyi's face. In addition to the news of Fujio winning the championship, there was also a photo of the Fu family team being kicked out of the arena. And there was a bold sentence in pure black font. In the esports arena, there is no need for this kind of imposter. Sume also saw that photo. The scene where her son raised his hand to block the camera made her clench her teeth. How could this be? How could things turn out like this? She had obviously spent a lot of money to find a hacker to steal the ID of Spadesy from the internet. It should be Ximing's. And how could that barbaric village girl's useless son be the real Spadesy? There were too many questions, and Sume almost couldn't help but want to smash the cell phone on the spot. Fortunately, she still had some sense left, and she knew that she couldn't make a fool of herself on such an occasion. However, when she raised her head, she saw that everyone was looking at her, and that there were cameras taking pictures of her. This made Sume pull Fu Zhongyi over, and they fled the scene without thinking. That stumbling back was full of embarrassment. However, this was the only way he could save his last shred of face by not saying anything. Because there was already a media reporter who couldn't help but say, "Boss Fu, don't go. Tell us, what do you think of your second son pretending to be your eldest son?" "Boss Su, the Fu family team was established by you. Don't you know anything about your son pretending to be Spadesy?" But looking at the reaction at the scene, it shouldn't be. Su Mei and Fu Zhongyi were no longer in the mood to say anything, and they just wanted to leave as soon as possible. When she rushed out, Su Mei's face was scratched. It hurt so much that she frowned, but she didn't dare to say a word. Mr. Lee was the only one left at the reception. He was still scrolling through the messages on his phone. Those small platforms that invested in the He family army actually exceeded the number of visitors of their platforms in an instant. Moreover, it had exclusive rights to broadcast Spadesy's personal interview. The word regret was not enough to describe Manager Lee's mood. He thought he would make a fortune. Now, because of Fu Ximing pretending to be Spadesy, not only did he have to withdraw all the publicity he had invested, but he also had to face the danger of the company collapsing. Boss Li's face turned pale as he held his phone in a daze. The scene of He Honghua begging him appeared in his mind. Manager Li, I know that businessmen value profits. We've known each other for a long time. Please don't withdraw your investment at such a critical moment, okay? I can't break down. If I do, my son will be finished. How did he answer then? Chapter 240. Now his company's reputation was about to go bankrupt, and He Corporation had become the darling of all the major advertisers. Any businessman would know that. Now, it was hard for He Corporation not to become famous. The new king of esports, Spadesy, who was the one who gave He Honghua the idea to play such a beautiful trick. Boss Li clenched the phone in his hand, and his heart felt like it had turned over a bottle of dye. He wished he had never withdrawn his investment. Boss Lu walked past him and said, Businessmen value profits, but they also need to know not to be ungrateful. Boss Li was shocked. Boss Lu didn't say anything else. He looked at the three people who had different endings, and walked to a quiet corner. Then he took out his phone, swiped the screen, and returned the call. On the top floor of the Qin group, Qin Emo glanced at his phone that kept vibrating. His eyes met the young man's, and he pressed the call button calmly. Boss Lu didn't waste any time and smiled. Boss Qin, I've done everything you asked for, and the results are pretty good. Those three people wanted to find a hole to hide in. Since the media was here, I didn't have to do much, and they would lose face if they did whatever they wanted. Yeah. Got it. Qin Mo's voice was very calm. He held his phone in his left hand, but he didn't forget to empty his right hand. He walked around the young man, pushed his hairy head, and asked him to sit over there. Almighty Qin was still talking on the phone at this time. How busy was he? Boss Lu was still talking on the other side, and he asked vaguely, Boss Qin, does this Sume have any grudges with you? No. Qin Emo reached out to toss his uniform to the side before turning on one of the computers. Boss Lu smiled and said, I think so too. Sume wasn't stupid enough to make life difficult for anyone but Boss Qin. But if they didn't have any grudges, why would CEO Qin call him during the game just now and ask him to stay at the party and wait for Sume and the others to talk to him? With Boss Qin's intelligence, he should have already guessed that they would have such a reaction. It was so embarrassing to say such a thing in front of so many people, but Boss Qin just had him wait here. He didn't believe that it wasn't intentional. Since there's no conflict, then. President Lu wanted to clarify, afraid that one day he would accidentally fall into the trap. Qin Mo's side profile was handsome, and he retracted his arm from Fujio's side. His deep eyes emitted a cold light. I'm a person who likes to protect my own. Director Lu, do you understand? What does this have to do with protecting his own people? Could it be? President Lu thought about it, and could only think of one possibility. President Qin was avenging someone? However, no matter what the reason was, Chairman Qin's move was too ruthless. Others didn't hear what Secretary Liang said, but Secretary Liang did. He was very, very worried. If his intuition was right, this call from the CEO was definitely related to the young man. President Qin, tell me, who did you hurt for young Master Jiao? Qin Mo kept his phone as though no one was around. He fiddled with it and glanced sideways at the youngster sitting not far away. Finally, he was completely by his side. From now on, he should be able to live a little more peacefully. Asterisk, 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 it's very important, and I have to write it here. School Hunk doesn't allow authorization. Any reprinting, adaptation, or other infringement is my bottom line, and I will go through legal procedures. Chapter 241. The Supreme Alliance was a godlike existence to the people who played esports. It was a pleasant surprise for everyone to be able to join them and sit at the top of the Qin group to control the game characters. Among the four of them, Shui Yaoyao came from a difficult background. There were some things that she didn't even tell His Highness Jiao. Her family didn't approve of her playing games. Especially for a family like Shui Yaoyao's, they couldn't accept such a new profession, Not to mention that she was still a high school student. Playing games would undoubtedly delay her studies. Every time she came out to meet with His Highness Gyo and the others, she would suffer from some rumors. Most of them were from relatives. Whether it was concern or mockery, they all said the same thing. How can she go to university if she's so poor? Let her work as soon as possible to lighten her burden. Letting her run around like this will only make her lose money. Someone even said to her mother, "Why should a girl play games? Hooking up with people online, isn't she afraid of losing her reputation?" Shui Yaoyao's mother had a weak personality, but she loved her child dearly. Yaoyao isn't that kind of person. She will play professionally in the future. Professionally? That person didn't understand esports at all. There are professionals in games? To make money? Wake up. That's something that only happens on TV. What does your Yaoyao have? She doesn't have a face, she doesn't have skills, and she's so fat. Who would play games like this? Her mother always thought that she didn't hear such words. However, every time she leaned against the door with red eyes, Shui Yaoyao would tell herself, she must have a bright future. She must get a good result, and she must advance. Now she was finally sitting here. Shui Yaoyao held the mouse in her hand and looked at the members of the Supreme Alliance beside her. Her fingers were shaking. Fujio sat next to her. After glancing at her, she took out a bank card from her coat pocket. Then, she put it in front of Shui Yaoyao with a light smile. Shui Yaoyao was stunned by Fujio's action. She looked sideways at the young man's fair and handsome face, and opened her mouth. His Highness Gyo, the prize for the first place in the rookie contest. The password is 6 9s. Fujio took a sip of Coke and held the king casually. Her thin lips were filled with tenderness. Yaoyao paused and pushed it back. No, I can't take it. This award was given by His Highness Gyo, so it should belong to His Highness Gyo. Yaoyao, what are you thinking? Fujio smiled knowingly. If it weren't for you, a healer and a distraction, I wouldn't have been able to kill them all. At this point, Fujio sat back and said evilly, What's more, do you think I lack money? Shui Yaoyao thought about Highness Gyo's behavior in school. Every now and then, he would buy something to show off his wealth. He was indeed a nouveau riche. Or do you think that Manager Feng's brother is short of money? When Fujio asked this, she glanced at Feng Shang, who was still chattering in front of Feng Yi. Yaoyao shook her head. The entire Jiang city knew that the Feng family was rich. Chapter 242. This is just the beginning, and the bonus isn't much. When we stand on the national stage in the future, every professional player will get a corresponding bonus from the league, so take it. Fujio chuckled and looked at Shui Yaoyao with a look that said, Look, this money can only be used to its full potential by you. Rich people like us don't need any bonus at all. Shui Yaoyao understood that Highness Gyo was looking for a suitable way to make her accept the money. She lowered her head and put the card away. Her voice was a little low. What are you thanking me for? It's what I should do. Feng Shang also came over at this time, and smiled with his eyes squinted. Our team only has one girl, so she'll be the team pet from now on. Everyone has to give in to her. The rest of the members of the Supreme Alliance completely agreed with his words. Especially the commentator Lin Feng, who was Yinhu's partner today. He grabbed Shui Yaoyao's arm. Girl Yaoyao, your arrival finally proves that the Supreme Alliance isn't a gathering place for monks. We also have a girl, and we are straight men with a normal sexual orientation. Those rotten rumors in the outside world will definitely fall apart. My chances of getting a girlfriend in the future won't be as bad as it is now. As he said this, Lin Feng took out a small mirror and looked at himself. You're so handsome. I'd be letting myself down if I didn't get a girlfriend. My spring is finally coming. Yinhu sneered, raised his hand, and pressed the mirror down. He only said 2 words to him, wake up. Lin Feng was furious. He grabbed him and ravaged him, but it was like scratching an itch on Yinhu's body. Shui Yaoyao really thought that they were a good match. Why would he need a girlfriend? But she wouldn't say this out loud. Fujio raised her hand and put it on the back of Shui Yaoyao's chair. Let me make this clear, senior brothers, Don't do anything to Yao Yao. The team members heard this and started jeering. Hey, what do you mean? Are you declaring your sovereignty? I brought her here, so of course I have to protect her. When Fujio said this, she was still smiling seductively. She didn't notice that Qin Mo, who was standing behind her, was looking at her. That pair of deep, pure black eyes gradually became cold after hearing this conversation. Even the way he held the phone was different from before. His fingers paused, and his raised eyebrows were filled with coldness. Secretary Liang stood at the side and shuddered for no reason. When he wanted to see his CEO's expression clearly, Qin Mo had already walked over. His voice was calm. What do you guys want to eat for the first gathering tonight? Tell Secretary Liang and ask him to book a place. Whenever Supreme Alliance had a new member, they would have a feast to celebrate. This was a tradition that happened every year. I want to eat hot pot. Hot pot again. Can't you be more creative? As long as there's meat, I'm not picky. Do you want to barbecue? No matter how many I roast, I won't be able to feed you. You are just a pig. Are you stupid? It's not like we're at the beach. There are waiters roasting for us. Oh right, I forgot. Let's eat barbecued meat. Barbecued meat with beer. We must have a dozen. With that, Lin Feng turned to ask Fujio. Little Spade, can you drink? Of course. Fujio licked her thin lips. You can have a dozen Budweiser. Chapter 243. Not bad. Fujio was still modest. Secretary Liang thought about a certain someone who went to nightclubs every day, and a certain someone who was kicked out of a nightclub because he was a country bumpkin. He fell silent. Young Master Gio, your glorious past can't be simply described as just okay. The more Lin Feng talked, the more excited he became. He wanted to have a good chat with Fujio, but who would have thought that before he could fully open his mouth, someone would grab his wrist. Captain? Lin Feng wasn't afraid of anyone. Other than Qin Mo, no one wanted to understand their captain's methods. Most importantly, he didn't understand why their captain's eyes were so cold. I remember that you haven't done the hand speed training I gave you today. Qin Mo's deep voice didn't reveal any emotions. Lin Feng froze. No, Captain, we don't need to train today, right? Others don't need it. Qin Mo glanced at the hand that was holding on to the youngsters. He lifted the corner of his lips and said coldly, You use it. Lin Feng. He really wanted to ask why. However, the captain had never been one to like being asked why. Usually, those who questioned the captain's decision would only end up worse off. For example, Coco and Fatty were still performing for the entire team. So it was better to offend a villain than to offend the captain. With tears in his eyes, Lin Feng turned his head to the side and began to practice his hand speed. Seeing him like this, everyone laughed. The atmosphere in Supreme Alliance was great, and they got along well. Since they had decided what to eat, Secretary Liang would definitely order the food. There was still half an hour before they left. Qin Mo reached out and pulled the young man's collar over, pressing him into the seat next to him. His side profile was noble and handsome. Fujio was still a little confused, but it didn't affect her innate ability to seduce people. She looked up at Qin Mo and gave him a seductive smile. Qin Mo couldn't be bothered to lecture the youngster anymore. He pulled out the black leather chair and leaned over to turn on the computer screen. His voice was low and magnetic. Everyone, go online and celebrate online. The celebration that Almighty Qin mentioned was definitely not a normal celebration. Hence, after hearing this, all the Supreme Alliance members' eyes lit up. Swoosh. All the team members pulled out their black leather chairs at the same time and sat in their respective seats. Every single one of them was wearing a specially made pure black combat suit. At that moment, Shui Yaoyao only felt the word handsome. Click. At the same time, he pressed the enter key and went online. His speed was so professional that it was shocking. It was a full set of alien computers, equipped with a large display screen. When typing on the red axis keyboard, there was a flash of light. It only took a second. Zone C of the hero exploded. Holy **T. What did I see? Yunhu, Lin Feng, and Almighty Qin. What's going on with Supreme Alliance? Almost all of them came online. Everyone online? This has never happened before, okay? It's really everyone online and my big spade. The prefix of big spade has changed. It had indeed changed. Not only was there a golden stream of light, but there was also a battle suit. Let's go. Chin Mo pulled the earpiece over with one hand and said only one word into the earpiece. The 11 game characters, each holding their own weapons, stood there as if the god of war had arrived. Chapter 244. Shui Yaorao had never thought that she would be one of them when she watched the league in front of her computer. Until now, when he saw the people lined up on the screen, even the blood in his veins was boiling and heating up. It was impossible to count the number of onlookers. Chin Mo tilted his head, his slender fingers tapping on the keyboard. Only one sentence appeared in the world. Celebrating the rebirth of Supreme Alliance. Those 6 words seemed to belong to him. Indifferent, domineering, shocking the entire server. Then the other players followed. In just 5 minutes, the entire Zone C was flooded with Supreme Alliance's messages. If sound could be heard in the game, they would definitely hear a group of fans screaming, "Almighties! So many almighties! I feel like I'm going to wake up from my sleep. Quick, take a photo. No photo, help my big spade do it manually." Celebrating the rebirth of Supreme Alliance. This was a sentence that came from the fans. With the first fan, there would be a second. Then came the third, the fourth. After countless times of celebrating the rebirth of Supreme Alliance. Some of the team members even wanted to smash their mouse. "Can't you let me play the game happily?" They were all professional teams. How could there be such a cruel gap? When they came online just now, no one cared about them at all. It wasn't just Hero that blew up. Even the operators were asking, "What's going on?" All of them came online? There was no news from the Teen Club. "Director, I don't want to talk about news. I just want to count the number of people who refreshed the World Channel today." When the director heard this, he was delighted. "A lot." "Well, director, Boss Phone called us and said that they'll get 70% and we'll get 30%. Otherwise, he'll ask Almighty Chin and the others to go offline." The director took a deep breath and pulled his assistant over. "Tell him his grandmother. I'll agree to it." What a cunning old fox. Feng Yi was indeed cunning. Was it so easy to be a top manager? None of the people under Almighty Chin were easy to manage. They would cause trouble at the slightest disagreement. All the team members came online. Did they know what that meant? Countless endorsement fees. But some people liked the Supreme Alliance because of them. Unrestrained, hot-blooded, not bothering about trifles. Sometimes they didn't care if they got paid or not. If they wanted to appear on camera, they could. For example, today, all of them came online to celebrate with everyone who truly loved Hero. The game was flooded with messages. Everyone in the server was watching. Everyone who played the game felt the incomparable popularity. Some said that this was the charm of Supreme Alliance. Under the leadership of that man, while they were invincible, they did not forget their original intentions. Fujio had never enjoyed such fun before. When she was a hacker in the past, there was only one offline person who helped her with the follow-up work and fake her identity. No one else had ever contacted her. He didn't expect that one day he would be able to fulfill a dream with so many people. Persevering in his beliefs made him so happy. Chapter 245. The impact of Supreme Alliance going online was huge. The most outstanding one was Yin Wuyao's internet cafe. It was really popular. He remembered that during the live broadcast of the selection contest, many players were watching the game in front of their computers. The moment Yin Wuyao appeared, those who knew the owner of the internet cafe spat out the coke in their mouths. They were so excited that they dragged their friends to the internet cafe to surf the net. Some of the frequent customers of the internet cafe didn't expect that the boss they often joked about was actually Yin Wuyao, their former idol. As a result, a group of people who liked to play games in internet cafes crazily rushed in. He asked the cashier, "Where's Uncle Yin?" "Ah, The cashier was just a university student, the kind that loved to study and had no interest in playing games. Moreover, he was a part-time worker and only liked to read novels, not online games. He didn't know what was going on, so he replied blankly, "The boss isn't back yet." "Why are you looking for the boss?" "Repair the machine?" "I can do it too." "Xiaomao machine, they want autographs." "Ah." Why didn't they recognize him in the past? That was because of the slight adjustments made during the game. Why didn't they recognize that Uncle Ian was from their Peking university? The feeling of regret and excitement was exactly what they were feeling right now. Feng Yi kept looking at the time on his wrist. Every member of the team couldn't be online for more than 10 minutes. If they continued playing, there would definitely be protests from other teams. Moreover, the National League was coming up. It was better to leave this grand occasion for the first match. Of course, Qin Mo disliked noise even more than Feng Yi. After about 5 minutes, he gestured to the team members beside him. "All of you went offline." Unbeknownst to everyone, Supreme Alliance's battle was like an invisible tornado, shocking when it came and disappearing without warning. "This feels great." This sentence was said by Lin Feng. Feng Shang nodded in agreement. His face was flushed. Secretary Liang, who had booked the place, walked over. He smiled at these young team members and said, "Everything is ready. We can go now." "Yay. Barbecue, I love barbecue the most." Lin Feng hooked Yin Hu's neck over as he spoke. Yin Hu looked as though he was helpless against him. He didn't even bother to acknowledge him, allowing the octopus to cling on to him. After playing for so long, Fujio was hungry, not to mention barbecue, which was her favorite. She put one hand in her pocket and pulled Shui Yaoyao up with a faint smile on her face. Qin Mo moved his fingers, removing the earphones on his short black hair. When he turned his head, this was the scene he saw. He smiled at first, but his eyes were cold. Then he rubbed his thin lips with his fingertip. His voice was gentle, magnetic, and pleasing to the ears. "Today, Ninth Lord is treating us. Eat to your heart's content." Fujio paused. When did she say she was going to treat? Why did this scene seem so familiar? Not only Fujio, but the other members of the Supreme Alliance were also stunned. Spadesy's treat? Why? Fujio also wanted to ask, so she raised her eyebrows stubbornly. "Brother Mo, we are new members. As the captain, it's not appropriate for me to treat you." Chapter 246. Fujio. Why did that sentence sound so familiar? Shui Yaoyao also paused, silently recalling the conversation with Highness Jiao and herself. Strangely enough, she found out the reason why Almighty Qin wanted Highness Jiao to pay the bill. Then, she looked down at her own hand that was being held by Highness Jiao. She didn't know why, but she felt a chill down her spine. Fortunately, Shui Yaoyao was more attentive as a bystander. She quickly started to save herself and let go of her hand. Qin Mo didn't say much. He reached out with one hand in his trouser pocket, and the other dragging the youngster by the back of his collar out of the top floor. Perhaps it was because both of them were too outstanding, but the scene was still very handsome. They were surrounded by male teammates, so they couldn't feel it. As a Fujoshi, Shui Yaoyao's blood was boiling. Although the way Highness Jiao and Almighty Qin got along with each other wasn't intimate, there was a vague sense of oppression and counter-oppression. But because of this, it made people feel that they were different. The players at the side were still discussing. Lin Feng. "Come baby Feng, tell me secretly how your captain offended our captain." Feng Shang recalled how his idol had mentioned sleeping with Almighty Qin in the game. He felt that he couldn't say it, so he shook his head decisively. Lin Feng raised his eyebrows. "Even if you don't say it, you've already offended him. Otherwise, Captain wouldn't have let him treat you to a meal." "Actually, I kind of know that." Yin Hu, who didn't like to gossip, interrupted. This piqued the interest of the Supreme Alliance members. "Why? Big Spade, also known as Fujio, is gay. He openly confessed to Captain in the school cafeteria." Yin Hu was especially serious when he said this, his handsome face solemn and serious. The girls watching the competition also received reliable news that even Fujio had participated in the newcomer competition to woo their captain. Lin Feng, Feng Yi, Yin Wuyao, Everyone. The top floor of the Qin group had never been so quiet. At that moment, he could really hear the sound of the chassis running. Shui Yaoyao saw with her own eyes that Secretary Liang, who hadn't left yet, froze in place. He looked like he was about to cry. Of course, Secretary Liang wanted to cry. The secret he had kept for the president for so long had been exposed. Lin Feng was the first to snap out of his daze. He pondered over this matter and finally came to a conclusion. He reached out and patted Feng Shang's shoulder. Today, I finally understand why Captain treats Big Spade so specially. He wants to keep him by his side and slowly torture him. Do you know what Captain hates the most? No, I don't know. Student Feng is still sad. He refuses to admit that his idol entered the selection contest to chase after Almighty Qin. He completely refuses. Lin Feng answered for him generously. Captain Qin hates gay men the most, especially gay men who have confessed to him. Half a year ago, there was a, what's his name again? Anyway, he's a very popular internet celebrity. He's not bad-looking. He wanted to turn Captain Qin gay, but Captain Qin chased him out of 3 provinces. So for the sake of our Supreme Alliance's future, please persuade Big Spade to give up on this idea. Chapter 247. After hearing Feng Shang's words, everyone in the team was shocked, especially Lin Feng, who turned his head and looked at Feng Shang with an expression that said, "You're awesome, my brother." Feng Yi had no choice but to pull his brother to the side and pretended to lecture him. How can you have such thoughts? It's obvious that Spadesy is chasing after young Master Qin. Don't talk nonsense, okay? Especially when we're drinking. Don't ever mention this to young Master Qin. Young Master Qin is narrow-minded and ruthless. His brother wouldn't even know how he died. Feng Shang was still stuttering, and he said seriously, Wasn't it Almighty Qin who dragged my idol away? Obviously he did. Captain probably dragged him away to teach him a lesson. Lin Feng guessed with certainty. In the future, Captain will probably come up with more rules and regulations for Little Spade, such as not allowing him to do this, not allowing him to do that. Little Spade is so handsome. Why does he like men? It's fine if he likes men, but the one he's chasing is Captain. Sigh, this is no different from seeking death. Do you know how much Captain hates gays? Although he respected other people's sexual orientation, the premise was that this kind of thing didn't happen to him. If anyone dared to touch him, he wouldn't be able to tolerate it. Besides, Captain was so skilled. Little Spade was hopeless. Even if he wanted to steal a kiss, he wouldn't be able to. He would definitely be beaten up by Captain. But don't worry, Little Shang. I like Little Spade so much that I won't let Captain kill him. Plus, as long as Little Spade doesn't act too obviously, Captain will definitely tolerate him a little. After all, the national competition is coming soon, and Supreme Alliance still needs him. The other team members listened and nodded in agreement. Shui Yaoyao stood there, and thought of only one question. If His Highness Jiu stole a kiss from young Master Qin, would young Master Qin really beat him up? Or no, I can't think like that. Shui Yaoyao patted her blushing face, but her eyes were full of little stars. Ever since they knew that Fujio was going to chase after Qin Mo, everyone in the team was on high alert. They were afraid that Fujio would do something that would anger their captain. If that happened, he would kill her directly. Therefore, they had a plan to completely isolate these 2 people. Little Spade, go sit beside Sister Yaoyao. You'll be able to shield her from the alcohol later. Lin Feng lowered his voice and said to Fujio. After saying that, he felt that he was so handsome and smart. How could he be so quick-witted? Fujio took off her jacket with one hand and nodded with a faint smile. She had always been gentle to Shui Yaoyao. But, seeing the youngster leave his side, Qin Mo's hand that was holding the wine glass paused for a moment. That pair of indifferent eyes looked up emotionlessly. He looked at Fujio, who was 4 people away from him, and the bottom of his eyes became even colder. With that, Yin, who sat beside Qin Mo, when he sat down, the Supreme Alliance general stilled. Was there something wrong with his senses today? Why was his captain so cold? Chapter 248. Fujio turned her fair and handsome face sideways, her silver hair falling behind her ears. She was still looking at the dishes on the menu with her fingertips, completely unaware that something was wrong. She asked Shui Yaoyao softly, "What do you want to eat? Are there any foods you don't like?" "Nope." Shui Yaoyao immediately shook her head. This time Qin Emo laughed. Through the layers of lights in the restaurant, his eyes watched this scene. He tilted his head and lit a cigarette. When the smoke lingered, the coldness intensified. In fact, the two of them were too far away from Qin Emo to be able to sense his aura. Fujio ordered a lot of things. She said to the waiter who was keeping accounts, "Do you have Budweiser for beer?" "Yes." "Give me 30 bottles first. I want the big ones. If it's not enough, I'll ask you to add more. Then give me some ice." "All right." It was normal for a dozen people to drink 30 bottles of beer, but no one would order ice when ordering beer. Therefore, the waiter couldn't help but take another look at the young man. Fujio turned around and raised her eyebrows. "What? No ice?" "Yes." The waiter's heart skipped a beat and her face immediately turned red. She quickly wrote down the order and walked away shyly. This was not the main point. The main point was that the waiter was a man. The guy was even shy. The members of the Supreme Alliance looked at each other and immediately gave Fujio a thumbs up. "Little Spade, you're really something." Fujio had an epiphany and curled her lips into a smile. "I can't help it." Lin Feng could not hold it in any longer. He turned around and asked Yin Wuyao, "Peking University, how did you get tricked into joining the team by this brat? How can you tolerate him like this?" Yin Wuyao raised his head silently, refusing to comment. "Am I not handsome?" Fujio was asking Shui Yaoyao this question, and she didn't forget to show her seductive smile. Even though she knew it was a woman, Shui Yaoyao still felt like she had been electrocuted. She blushed and nodded. "Look." Fujio tore open the chopsticks and put them in her mouth. She looked at Lin Feng. Lin Feng turned his head and grabbed Yin Hu's hand. "I want to beat him up. What should I do? Give me a reason why you want to beat him up." Yin Hu's voice was as deep and steady as he was. Lin Feng was very serious. "He's more handsome than me. As long as it's a man here, which of them isn't more handsome than you?" Yin Hu caressed his head. "Give up on that idea. You can't beat me up." Fujio, who was listening on the side, couldn't help but smile at Shui Yaoyao, as if they had some kind of tacit understanding. This made Qin Emo, who was sitting in the middle, smile even wider. Then he raised his hand and extinguished the cigarette in his hand in the ashtray beside him. Yin Hu felt his hands turning cold, but he couldn't find a reason. Lin Feng had always been someone who knew how to warm up the crowd. Once the beer was served, he filled everyone's mugs and stood up proudly. "From today onwards, Supreme Alliance has new blood. Let's go to the National League and wipe them all out. Last year, our captain's hand was injured, and we weren't very good either, so we didn't even make it to the semifinals. This year is different. Even if our captain doesn't make a move in the early stages, we can still make it to the semifinals with proper treatment." The Almighty's hand was injured before? And it was still in the treatment period? As someone who had played dungeons with Qin Emo and got the first kill, Fujio really couldn't tell. That you're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.